Good evening. So, for tonight's live stream, I want to give a shot at explaining what I've been talking about in terms of essence, the eternal clear knowing. If you haven't seen any of the previous videos, gotten the previous context, that should be fine. But if you have, I hope there's a question wandering around. Kind of like, what's this guy talking about? Hopefully, though, you've gotten a flavor of what I'm pointing at. If you have, in some sense, you already have the answer. But before I dive into that, I want to go meta for a moment and give a little context about how I'm approaching this video. The whole point of this 100 days of live, this 100 days of visibility, is me showing up and interacting with others, or interacting in a live way, being seen, with trying to embody, to the best of my ability, the types of practices that I can see are, oh, this is actually valuable. So this is primarily an exercise for myself. So how is me explaining to other people an exercise for myself? And a lot of it is, I like offering what I see. I like putting it out there for people. I like making things clear. I get a deep sense of satisfaction out of taking a mess of a concept set and a lived practice that I can see some value in, distilling the essence, organizing it, and making it clear. Like, it's sort of like I'm leaving these stamps along the way of what I would have wanted when I encountered this thing. I can give a bunch of examples, but this is a strong drive for me. And there's another side that keeps wanting to come in, a desire to fix or save people. And that isn't aligned with what I want to do. So for me, it has to do with navigating, how do I lean in the enjoyment of tidying things up, offering them, allowing people to do with them whatever they want, and me just to enjoy my life and enjoy showing up, which includes an aspect of kindness to other people, without adding this element of that there is something others are doing wrong with their lives, or something I need to do to save the world. I have another video about why I think trying to save the world is itself self-undermining. I have several of those. I've talked about that quite a bit, so I won't get into that here. So back in the content of this. So essence. So I borrow this term essence because, and I guess I want to give a little bit more preface in that I don't have a crystal clear concept yet, but I'm moving in that direction. I have a very clear feeling, and I'm starting to feel that out. So I'm going to talk about this, and in the course of this video, I may recognize, oh, this is how it should be presented. Got it. So if I reach that point, I will highlight it. So I've been working with a person by the name of Perry Chase, who describes a different way of doing business. This, to me, was a direct answer to a puzzle that I was working on. About a year ago, I was really racking my soul and mind for, I had this structure that I was calling wise knowing. And I might at some point return to that name. It's sort of on pause for the time being. But there's a structure that I was seeing, a kind of game theory for the world, and what that was calling me and other people into. And there was excitement for me about that, but I couldn't see how to have an income that allowed me to focus on implementing this without making the method of getting income undermine the principles I was trying to teach, that I was hoping to eventually embody. And Perry basically explained why in ways that I had not seen anybody else doing. I was able to describe the mechanics of what's going wrong, but I didn't have a solution, and I was inching towards it, and she just had one. The issue, in short, is any attempt to make what is put forward into the world based on solving a problem and trying to, like, hello, you want this thing here, right? This will solve your problem, or this will give you meaning as you help the world to deal with its problems. Don't you want meaning? Don't you want to help the world? Having that kind of hookiness undermines the integrity of respecting others' sovereignty and respecting one's own sovereignty. And this creates the very loops that I was actually talking about when I was referring to wise knowing. Um, this is this is sort of like how there's kind of a problem with mental health therapy in that if there, like a bunch of people in neurolinguistic programming complained about this, saying, "Hey, we've got techniques that can cure phobias in 20 minutes. Why do you have these programs that last for years?" And I don't know about the nature of the debate, but there is an economic problem of if a therapist can cure uh, their clients' problems in one session, this does not form a very good business model in some sense. Same with there's an incentive problem with curing cancer. It's very similar. Like if we were actually to come up with a cure for cancer, this would put an enormous industry out of business, and a lot of people would have dramatic drops in income or just lose their jobs, and that's pretty significant. That's a pretty strange incentive structure to have in the search for a cure for cancer. It's unclear whether that is a defining factor, but it would be strange if it weren't an influence. So staring at all of this and going, what do? And Perry's suggestion is what she calls a magic-led business. I will not pretend to teach this. This is me describing the impressions that I've gotten and me looking at it going, oh, from what I can tell, she is offering a correct solution. And this is part of why I've been working with her. She was the one that originally suggested to other people, but I picked up on it and went, I think this would be a good practice for me. She's the one that provided this suggestion of the context for the 100 days of visibility, specifically as a transformational practice. So in that context, the basic method, as I understand it, is anchor in essence, and I'll explain this in a second, anchor in essence, and then from the anchoring in the essence, noticing what frequencies want to come through, and getting out of the way and letting it happen. Like this, most of it is just these three. And the question is, well, how do you do those? I'm not going to go through and explain all of this. I also don't claim to know all of it. I'm still feeling it out and learning it myself. And it's quite possible that if Perry saw this, she might look at that and say, no, that's totally missing the point. But that's fine. If I'm totally missing the point, then I'm landing on a different point. So, yeah. With the essence part of what landed for me relatively recently, like it's been landing for a while, but it really clunked. It really went, oh, that's my essence. Got it. So the role of essence in this context, this is, I don't know if Perry ever defined it, so I'm going by Perry. Don't blame her for what I say. Don't attribute to her what I'm saying. My impression, so the thing that I'm zooming in on is fundamentally, at its core, it is how I relate to truth. And so when there's this quality of truth as fact, not truth as information, not truth as facts, not truth as ideas. And E equals mc squared. Like pi is the ratio of the circumference of a circle to its diameter. Like these are, I mean, whatever. Like, there's a way to relate to those that has deep truth to it, and I think that that's important. But for most of the time, for most people, Paris is in France. Like, okay, it's just an idea. It's received wisdom, or received knowledge, rather. Um, when I look at something like, oh, I can feel my tongue in my mouth, and that's true. There's a kind of, it doesn't matter what kind of philosophy you do, what kind of babble you give me. Oh, actually, you're just experiencing your mind's projections, yada, blah, 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 blah. There's this feeling of, that's nice. I can feel my tongue in my mouth. This boom, this thud, this knowing has a very particular quality to it. There's a universality to that quality, but it appears to me that each person has a different way of relating to that quality. In terms of the hemispheres of the brain, using Ian McGilchrist's version of this, of the left and right hemispheres of the brain, I think what this is talking about is the right hemisphere's presentation of reality, as opposed to the left hemisphere's representation. So the left hemisphere comes up with all of these facts and ideas, whereas like what I'm talking about right now, this is very left hemispheric. This is idea-based. This is in the head. This is in the mind. Because I'm describing a left hemispheric model of what the right hemisphere is doing. But the right hemisphere's actual experience is here. So that here-ness, the ground of truth. So there's this ground of truth, that sense of what is true, what is real. That is secretly the foundation of everything. There's no way to function without using that as the basis. There's a thing that the mind can do where it sort of creates these thought bubbles and sort of meanders off, but the ability to create the thought bubbles itself originally came from this grounding. So a straightforward example, in a lot of the circles I've been in, my master's degree was mathematics, my PhD is in math education. I spent 7 years working with a whole lot of people who are predominantly in software engineering, computer science, deep mathematics, trying to figure out how do we engineer human minds to be clear, to be effective, to be rational, in ways that are supportive to the whole system, including things having to do with the heart and embodiment and all of that. So like a lot of technical immersion. In that kind of context, there's, I suspect that this idea I'm putting forward, there'd be a kind of hesitation about, well, what do you mean, like ground of truth? There are kinds of things that like we're certain of that we later find out aren't so, and like that's what science is about, and like how do you sort it out? Like what's the principle? And the thing is, there's a loop here, that there's a loop in that kind of objection that is very hard for a mind that is presenting that objection to see clearly. But it is crystal clear once you see it. It's absolutely crystal clear. And that this is, on what foundation are you building your confidence in reasoning? When you say something like, if A then B, also A is true. Therefore, B is true. Is this correct? Modus, oh shoot, I've forgotten which one, modus ponens or modus tollens. I don't even remember the Latin anymore. But anyway, if A then B, A therefore B. Like this is one of the most classic examples of logical reasoning. Like if it's raining, then the sidewalk is wet. Also, it's raining. Is the sidewalk wet? Yes. Like this is not terribly complicated, but it's interesting to track where is that knowing grounded? It can't be in logic, because logic is what you are grounding. This is a common issue in logic. A lot of the academic research in logic is not trying to seek certainty anymore. They used to, and this literally drove some logicians insane. Um, the foundations of logic and mathematics turn out, there are actual logical and mathematical proofs that you cannot build complete, consistent foundations that account for the reasoning that you want to. Probably the best known example of this is Gödel's incompleteness theorem. I won't go into the math of it, although I do think there is something that hurts my heart about the common relationship to mathematical reasoning. When I say math, I do not mean the thing that most people encountered in school. That's computation. Most people have pointless, mind-numbing, soul-violating contexts where a practice of acting like a computer gets pounded into them over and over again over the course of years, and they call that mathematics. That's not math. It's just not. Some people figure out what math is despite how it's taught, and some teachers get some glimmer that there is a true art underneath all of this, and they try to figure out how to teach it, but the inherited trauma structure is too strong. So when I say mathematics, I mean an actual spiritual transformative art. Most people who have figured out the art despite the teaching in computation wouldn't normally think of it as spiritual, but very much is. The ecstasy that mathematicians experience when they get something. That is the bliss of insight. They're getting a glimpse of the bliss of insight. Okay? It is a spiritual practice. It's just, I don't consider there to be a meaningful difference between spirituality and the pursuit of truth. Okay? So, and also there's a problem where mathematics as practice is very disembodied now. I don't think that's necessary either. Okay? That's a side tangent. So, when tracking something like, if A then B, A therefore B, is that general structure true? There's a process that happens to feel into it and go, yes. So where is that knowing coming from? That yes. That's the ground of truth. You can't do logic or reasoning without it. It's the foundation. If you try to go off into logic la la land in order to examine the foundation, you end up with these self-reference loops. And if you trust the self-reference loops and the logic land over the ground of truth, you end up lost in thought. This is the basic conundrum of the Western world at this point. We are living in psychotic fantasies. That's the basic issue. We live in psychotic fantasies rather than grounding the capacity to fantasize that way back into what matters, back into the material world. And that's not a cognitive exercise, that's an embodied one, to really live it here. So this business of essence, like the term essence, as I understand it, and therefore as I use it, is a description of the way, in this case, when I talk about my essence, I am talking about the way I relate to truth. The way I relate to truth is a little bit different than how my girlfriend relates to truth, different from how Perry Chase relates to truth. It seems to be different from how almost every person relates to it. There's some quality here like how I relate to truth is my uniqueness as an individual, approximately speaking. I have some fuzz in the concept structure here, but I think that's basically right. So there is a question of how am I relating to this thud? This, yes, that's true. Why? Why is a silly question. Why do I know I can feel my tongue in my mouth? That's what knowing is. When I hit that level, that's what knowing is. There isn't any further to go. Or trying to go further loops on itself. There's a subtle experience of self-reference, I find. That means that's bedrock. And on that bedrock, it is possible to stand. I can orient. I have clarity. And I can't be confused. I can have it turn out that the thought structures and the commentary that I give on top of that foundation have added things that don't actually make sense. Like, what is a tongue? And blah, 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 blah. Oh, the tongue is connected to blah, 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 blah. Like, I have lots of ideas that can come up. Those ideas can be mistaken. But I know which parts can be mistaken and which parts are just true. Not as a concept, but by looking. And the knowing is not cognitive, it is perceptual. So, tracking my relationship to that knowing, that foundation, there's a question of how do I relate to it? I notice that when I keep relentlessly focusing on this question, and I did a lot of this and I've sort of whittled away a lot of things for quite a while, and I still default to this. Like the way that my body wants to have it is like, bam, this is true, like a boulder. There's some sort of forceful element to it. The thing is, truth doesn't require force to be reinforced or supported. Truth is just true. There's nothing to protect. Truth is absolute. And so all of that defensiveness, like part of the reason I had that quality to it is because there have been little, I guess you could call them micro traumas or something. I want a better term for this in Hindu philosophy, or I don't know about Hindu philosophy, but in yoga philosophy, like Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, I believe the term for this is klesha. Although the book The Untethered Mind by Michael Singer used the term samskara for this. I'm not sure what the difference is between samskara and klesha. But anyway, whatever it is, this kind of bundled up sense of there's been this sense of I've had a tremendous amount of self-doubt throughout my life, including my adult life, because I have tried to make sense of things using my mind. I have a very powerful mind. This is a wonderful gift. I'm not responsible for it. I just showed up in this body, and this mind was here, and it's a powerhouse. It is wonderful. I really enjoy its properties. It also can do some really disturbing traps. It's very clever. So I spent a long time trying to reason through things like, how do I deal with self-deception? Well, I mean, the problem is, if I'm deceiving myself right now, this is what it would feel like. Self-deception looks the same as not self-deceiving. So how do I know? And I started coming up with terms like metacognitive blind spots because I was trying to internalize in my ways of thinking, how do I track the parts of my mind that I can't see, even when I try to see them, even when I account for this fact that when I try to see them, I can't see them. What are the metacognitive mirrors I can use in order to see this? Oh, so one of the best ones I got was, oh, if I listen to other people and I take what they say seriously, then I can get reflections that can show me places in myself that I can't see. But the problem I run into there is, well, but what if I'm dealing with their ego? What if I'm dealing with manipulation? What if I'm dealing with bad actors? Even if they don't consciously recognize it, what if I'm dealing with their reactivity or their blind spots? And I'm the one who's right and they're mistaken. Then this reflection that they're insisting is my blindness is actually their blindness. But that's also what my mind would say if I were self-deceiving and then trying to block out the information. How do I deal with this? How do I get around this? Okay, well, I need some kind of strategy. And the answer is no. No, I don't. On one level, I do, but the strategy is not to go further up into thought. It can't work that way. And the reason it can't work, I just gave a bunch of arguments about why it can't work. Because going into more epicycles of thought doesn't address the fact that being in cycles of thought is still in the mind and isn't grounded in truth. So if my mind can't tell what's true and what's not, going more into the mind won't solve that problem. The problem is the need of a perception. That comes by dropping below the mind. And in this case, I'm using mind and basically the functions of the left hemisphere as conceived by Ian McGilchrist. I'm using those approximately synonymously. Like the thinking machine, the thing that produces thoughts and verbalizes and creates models and isolates things in order to examine them, and then tries to put together like little toy thought experiments and lets you get lost in ideas, as opposed to the quality of being here. So, in that quality, I find that when I drop and I land into this kind of truth, there's a relief. And the relief, for me personally, is coming from a lifetime, I mean, a quarter century or so, of living in a lot of self-doubt and questioning my own certainty and questioning authority but trying to receive authority at the same time and not knowing who or what to trust. And there is, with this, a kind of utter solidity. It is the only stable place, which is reality, or truth, or being, the isness. So that quality of is, in some sense, my own fear of getting lost in more self-doubt. But that's not the nature of how I relate to the truth. That's how I react to the fear of getting pulled away from it. What exactly is the quality? What exactly is my experience of, oh, this is true? This right here. The answer to that question is a perceived question. I've come to prefer referring to like a koan rather than like a question. The koans will ask questions that you ideally you don't answer verbally, at least at first. Eventually you can answer them verbally, but the reason is you are verbalizing a direct perception. You're not verbalizing an idea. So an example of a koan is, how does your tongue feel? Now, if you answer that immediately with words, there's a problem, which is that you are probably focused on the words instead of on the feeling, and on the process of articulation instead of on the sensation of the tongue. So actually answering the koan is going down into experience and going, like that. This is part of the reason why answers to koans often sound very perplexing, and a lot of the questions are a lot more tantalizing and confusing than the one I just gave. So what was your face before your parents were born? Part of doing that involves noticing that there's this concept of before my parents were born, but I have to look at that concept from the present moment of experience. What is my face in recognizing this imagined, simulated memory, this hypothesized past? Well, my face is empty. There's nothing here. I don't experience my face. There's these kinds of sensations here. But there's a concept of a face. That concept is something I am seeing. So what is my face? It can create this sort of sensory effect of zooming back to the point of experience, the center of experience, and recognizing there is no center, ultimately. And when that happens, there's this opening, a vast opening and a vast here-ness. It's really difficult to talk about that as an intellectual model. It's something that is easier to talk about after grounding in the experience. So in this same sense, what is my quality of relating to truth? That is a koan, whose answer is the eternal. So this is part of the reason I've had a little difficulty talking about it, but in this process of anchoring more and more deeply in it, coming to become much more intimately familiar with it. Before, I tried to express this as clear knowing. Oh, when I relate to truth, it has this quality of clear knowing. Oh, that is true, utter clarity. But I now think that's just a little distant from the actual essence. It's not badly distant. It's like it's pretty good. It's better than wise knowing was. Wise knowing had a little bit of the energy to it, the tension, just a little bit. Wise knowing, in terms of how I was feeling it, that's not inherent to the words, but my choice of the words has that resonance for me. Clear knowing as a description, as a handle, creates a slightly more free resonance. This, oh, it's just true. But there is a movement. Yeah, I even started. I'm looking over at my notebook because I had a number of anchors when I was working with the phrase clear knowing. I just pulled these up to remind myself right before going into this session. I think clear knowing is very close. The eternal, the expression of the eternal fuses together some elements that it felt like there were two sides in clear knowing. There is like this crystalline clarity and lightness to it. And there's also a void aspect, an emptiness. And what do I mean by that? Well, I'm not trying to define this for a left hemispheric model. I'm trying to capture a feeling that as I resonate with it, what I'm resonating with is truth. As I'm resonating with the path I use to touch back to truth, that I'm using to have my ideas. What is the pathway? The pathway is through clear knowing or the eternal. You know, the eternal as a phrase has come to be much more central for me. But in some ways, I think maybe the just getting this sense of where I am right now, maybe clear knowing is a little bit easier to describe. So I'll so I jotted down some words. A lot of other people, most of the other people in Perry Chase's programs are women. She just started a men's program this January because a lot of guys kept coming to her saying, "Hi, I like your work. I want to work with you." And the energy that the women bring has a different quality to it. In that context, I actually don't know whether what I'm saying is relative to the sexual split, the gender dynamic, whatever. But there's an emphasis on creating picture boards, and now I might try to create a Pinterest board to try to capture some of this. In particular, for those 3 steps I named before about magic-led business. The second one of notice and resonate with frequencies that want to come through you. I've got one. It's really clear and it's really great. And it's exciting. And it means that I will probably start putting a program together very soon. It's sort of like what wise knowing should have been. But I found that for me, I have a gift of words. I'm able to articulate things very clearly, and I can put resonance into words. So just writing these down instead of trying to come up with a Pinterest board, it's been very helpful, and it was very straightforward for me. So I'll describe a few of the anchors that I use. The important part when I'm going through this is not that you take these and then go, this is the definition, or here are that's too analytic. I wrote these so that when I read them again for myself, I resonate with the essence. The way that you hear the meaning as I say this is that you feel what happens in your body as I name these. It's not about the concept, it's about the feeling in the body. Because if you are attuning to me, if you're paying attention to me, and I'm ringing clearly with the essence that I am holding, then it will ring in your body. That's how you know the essence, through the direct experience. You don't do it through the mind, you do it through perception. Okay. So, a single ringing bell. Bum. A crystal, I go on to describe the crystal, a very specific shape, a hexagonal prism with hexagonal pyramids capping each end. So pure and clean and clear that only the edges are visible. Absolutely clear. A well-made mechanical watch's ticking. One tick. And clean lines, clear, crisp, precise. Right here. Here. Okay. A precise point. Exact. So there are a few other things that I mention in there that I go into, but this is trying to capture something about this is what this essence feels like to me. What that does for me is it gives me an anchoring point. It gives me an experiential check of, am I relating to truth or am I getting lost in something else? Is what I am doing with this something else relating to truth, or is it going off into la la land? So it creates an anchor for everything else I do. How am I relating to truth? Is this relating to truth? Am I relating to truth in this? Now, I've made a shift since then. The difference between clear knowing and the eternal. It is a slight correction. It's getting a little closer to the actual essence, the actual feeling of, oh, that is how I relate to truth. So for that, I find myself wanting to name stillness. That one tick of the clock. The precision is made of emptiness. There is forever right here. Quality with which I know. I can feel my tongue in my mouth. You can do any bevel you want. I still feel my tongue. The absoluteness with which a mathematical line is infinitely thin and utterly unbendable. Even the concept of bendability for a mathematical line, absurd. And that truth is eternal. Okay, so that feeling, that sense of right there. Not here, precise points, clear, got this, that's just too fast, it's too loud. Right here, right now. So I offer this to offer a feeling. Like this is energetic work. This is energetic perception. This feeling, this essence that I'm talking about, that's probably going to be different for you. Just fact. As far as I can tell, everybody's essence is a little different. Even somebody else who would resonate tremendously with, man, eternal. Yes, that's the thing. I want to deepen that. I really want to deepen that. But in practice, from what I can tell, there's something like everybody, because everybody is relating to truth in some way, and truth is true, it's real. Another way to say truth is reality, is, the is. If you have a religious leaning, you could say God, but it's important not to confuse this with the concept of God. Real spiritual work will almost always destroy somebody's sense of religion and their sense of God, because in coming into contact with reality, it turns out that truth is much more vast than any kind of dogma or any kind of belief system was ever able to hold. The belief system is like a container, like a vessel floating through an ocean, and then at some point it dissolves and then you dissolve, and then it turns out, oh, you've been trying to travel to the ocean the whole time. It's like it was useful for a while in a curious kind of way. So, but the thing is that because we are all relating to the same thing, there's like the blind man and the blind men and the elephant kind of effect. My naming the eternal, not conceptually, but in resonance, and me saying truth, 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 beating my drum. But for me, it's not a drum, it's a bell. Dun. Crisp, clear. I have something to name. I have something to bring. An angle on truth that I am an embodiment of. So the more I get into relationship with my way of relating to truth, and the more I allow that relationship to reach back and transform all of me to be in alignment with that, to be a channel for truth, but as me, as the manifestation of me, the more clearly this form, this unique form of reality can speak from this angle, the more clearly that this blind man can express this aspect of the elephant. So what I have to offer is service to the eternal in you, if you want it. And this just happens. It happens by exposure. It happens by the containers that I hold. It happens by the way that I talk, the way that I offer, the way that I am. The more clearly I am in relation with truth, the more clearly others can feel that way of relating to truth, and that can help them to hone in on their own version. And also add complexity and nuance. Like Perry's is about power. I don't really understand how power and truth, how power is the relating to truth. I can get it sort of, like if what is true is powerful. This is like science leading to technology. That's an obvious example. But there's something about this that I don't grok, I don't get yet, because that's not how I relate to truth. But I'm still benefiting tremendously from being in Perry's presence and feeling her resonance, letting her essence speak to the parts of me that are close enough and get those attuned. So I sort of get the power add-on, so to speak, get the power adjustment. There's one of Perry's students who describes her essence as about opulence. The beautiful word, opulence. Right? An expression of divinity that has this is what it means to relate to truth in this particular way. And for her, I don't think she'd say relating to truth. That's not how she works. Although I might be mistaken, I'm still getting to know her and getting to know the feel of her, and I'm a little more distant to her. There's this, and each person is bringing their own quality, because that's what it means to be an individual. What makes people individual is that, I mean, in one sense, it's the fact that they have separate bodies. That's how we're defining it. But the separation creates a different kind of experience set and a different way of relating to the world. It's going to be pretty unusual to find two people with identical resonances for truth. So this whole arc of what I've been doing, when I say, oh, earlier, the previous video where I tried to work on articulating this, when I said, okay, this is the anchor that I'm using, I will probably refine it, and I have. I've refined it to the eternal. I might turn out to refine it even more. Um, there's a part of me that's looking at it going, I suspect what will actually happen is I will deepen what eternal means to me. Because going to eternity and then carrying on to something else afterwards, like, what does that even mean? Part of the point is the clarity of that. The fact that I can look at that and go, oh, everything that happens outside of time is happening now. And that includes the act of entering time. That is this experience. That is why the now is so precious. This is everything. And paradoxically, other moments come as well. How does that make logical sense? Well, logic mostly pulls on intuitions of time. When we work outside of time, there's a lot more freedom. It has its own kind of logic, but it's a different sort of logic. It's a different flavor of logic, and it comes from relating to what is eternal. So my suspicion is that I will probably stay with the eternal, and that I'll deepen my own impressions of that. But I don't get to know that. That part I don't get to go, that's true. But there's a lot more for my relationship with this handle of the eternal to teach me. But earlier when I said, I serve clear knowing, this is what I was talking about. I was trying to express this quality of, I am, and to the extent that I can plug in with reality and that I can offer something that can, without weird epicycles or manipulations, where I can offer something that can actually be of service to others. What I'm actually doing is I'm not being of service to others at all. I'm being of service to the clear knowing in them. Although now I would say I am of service to the eternal in others. Other people can do whatever they want to. I'm serving the eternal. I am an embodiment of immortality. That doesn't, I don't know about this body being immortal. I didn't notice I'm getting some white hairs in my beard, which is interesting. It is an interesting experience to look at that and go, huh, huh. But I don't mean I am immune to aging. I mean, what I am and how I orient to the world has this kind of clarity about relating to both death and everlasting life. That's one aspect of relating to the eternal. And that's been transforming over time. It's been deepening. So being, when saying I serve the eternal, serve in this case, part of what that has to do with is to the extent that I view myself as separate from my relationship to truth, that is actually a confusion. Now, I understand this mentally, but that understanding hasn't grown roots all the way down. So as I become more deeply familiar with this essence, and it reaches into me and transforms me more and more deeply over time, as I adjust more and more so that I am more and more anchored in, oh, how does this relate to the eternal? Is this movement in service of the eternal? I could also say, is this true? But somehow that's a little more distant. It's prone to analysis. I don't know, is it true? But if I look at it and I ask, is this eternal? For me, that is such a clear anchor. I can cut through all of the shame and confusion and come right back to now. And when I say I serve the eternal, this is a reference to I choose, I intend for that transformation to happen all the way. I hold that intention. And this will do some strange things like go through various layers of ego temporary obliteration and reorganization. I've experienced several waves of this before, and I can tell there are some yet coming that will be even more intense. There's part of me that's kind of excited by that, and another part that's going, do you remember what that was like? That was kind of awful. In fact, you ever described that as the worst experience of your life. Yeah. Yep, and I'm probably going to go through some that are going to be even worse than those. Not what I prefer, but I sort of expect it. I'd be happy to be wrong. But there's a kind of clarity that has to do with, well, what's the alternative? The alternative is the temporary. This is not how it works for everybody, but in terms of, oh, this is my essence, and this is the alternative. Now I can see this clearly, because that's my essence. My essence is seeing these things clearly. That's part of why I was working with wise knowing before, clear knowing after that, and now the eternal. But this business of clarity and knowing, the precision, right, this is how it works. So I can see, oh, I see. The alternative to utter, complete, balls to bones devotion to truth in the way that it manifests for me is death. And the process of getting to death is not very pleasant. It involves a whole lot of the ego going, you know, how about instead of truth, we try for entertainment? How about we play the same games? How about being frustrated about the girlfriend being far away for months and months and months and months? How about we keep playing that game, but play the game with this extra twist of let's pretend we don't want it. How about that game forever? Like, life doesn't change. Instead, life impacts, and then my clinging to my clinging to that egoic form would make the impacts of life, like with aging, like with if my partner were to leave me, with or me cheating on her, I don't know. Like there's all kinds of things that can happen, and that these impacts would feel devastating and painful because they would be forcing me to change, because the difference between who I am and what is true will become too large, and truth will start smashing my egoic boundaries. That is the experience of trauma. That is the experience of and I have not encountered a clearer, more elegant term than malefica. The concept of malefica comes from ancient astrology and Renaissance astrology, how the malefics work, Saturn and Mars. But what makes them malefic? It's not that they're bad guys, although that's basically what the word means. It is that the way that they help, the forces that they manifest, are ones that the ego tries to avoid learning from. And because of that, the learning process is painful. Saturn basically is death. Death, decay, depression, failure. So taking these as a metaphoric frame, there's this force. This is describing the mechanism of death, the mechanism of Saturn. So there's this basic law of truth: go willingly or be dragged. So the choices are the eternal or the temporary. And it's a free choice. I can choose what I want. It's not like I'm wrong to choose the temporary. But another way of framing this question is, do I want to let go of the pains that I've been carrying, which means experiencing a bunch of them, but letting them go and living a joyous life? Or do I want to experience those pains anyway, but no longer on my terms, to have them sort of forced, and I might or might not get to the point of satisfaction in this life? That's the actual choice. And I can see that clearly. So it's a little funny to say that I serve the eternal. It's a framing that's a little strange, like, oh, I bow before. But it's what that's meant to do is humble the ego. The ego needs to kneel before the truth. and say, whatever is false about me should be beheaded. And if I am false, behead me. But it's not the ego, like having a house plant that you decide to like throw in the dumpster or something like that. This feels like who you are. That's what the ego is. It is the lived experience of you as a finite creature. So coming to this relationship of how can this body and mind and soul, the energy system, how can all of this be a more complete channel for the eternal? Holding the desire to embody that question, to answer it as a koan. That's what I mean by I serve the eternal. I'm really just, in some deeper sense, I'm serving myself. I just notice, oh, there are all these ways where I'm not used to thinking of who I am as who I really am. I have these thoughts off to the side, these habits, and they're creating pain for me and for those around me. So how about I don't do that anymore? Footnote, in case you feel like this has been feeling making sense, but there's a part of the mind that's going, wait, what does this even mean? Is he talking about some kind of like ontology of soul? So if you don't know what ontology is, that's fine. But like, if you're worried about me challenging a materialist framework or challenging some kind of spiritual idea you have or whatever, the short version is no. This is not an intellectual supposition. This is an engineering effort. This is practical. It's experiential. How do I relate to truth? That's a koan. How do you relate to truth? That's a koan. When you answer the koan by going down into experience, you will have a very practical mechanism you can work with. The answer to that question is your essence. It is the uniqueness that has the power to transform you and everyone around you in the ways that are most deeply fulfilling. You just have to decide that that's what you want to do. We can talk about the philosophy of what is real, does this exist, how does this compare to what physics is saying, what's going on in the brain, blah, blah, blah. But those are thoughts, and those thoughts get built on a foundation of knowing. How do you know about science? Because you've been told? How do you know you've been told? How do you know you've understood what's been said? How do you know you understand the words I'm speaking right now? Not because of other thoughts. It's because you have a relationship to truth. So what is that relationship? Answering that question is really, really potent. So I will leave you with that koan. Thank you for listening.